This Jocks 94.5 podcast is brought to you by Millennium Satellite and Video. Log on to msbnow.com. TV excellence everywhere. That's Millennium. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning starts now.
I almost want to get Pash on just to tell that story, if that is how it went down.
At some point, I think we could probably make that happen.
Okay, we'll get that done. 7:28, Thursday, August 21st. A little bit behind for Ryan McGee to join the show, but he's going to be with us now on the Higginbotham hotline. Ryan, I've told a few people, one of my biggest surprises at SEC Media Days, and there were a lot of things that were discussed that people didn't know or didn't think was real or weren't really given proper respect, was I feel like every time I did an interview with somebody that when we looked around and talked about Vanderbilt, they immediately sort of brushed them to the side and said, yeah, but they're back to, and I talked to Jordan Rogers about him yesterday. He's like, look at the offensive production down the stretch. Like, I don't think it's going to be that great. I don't think they're going anywhere. I definitely don't think they go backwards. You have an interesting write-up on Diego Pavia here recently. What's your true expectation for the Commodores this season?
Well, I mean, honestly, and I appreciate you mentioning the story, and good morning, boys. And, to hear him talk, they're going to win 12 games and go to the playoff, and he's going to win the Heisman. I don't think that's probably how that's going to go down. But I think that if the college football tooth fairy came to them right now and they said, you guys can win 7 games and win another bowl game, and you can pull off an upset that's going to get everybody's attention, and at least listen, Vanderbilt's goal is to be in the conversation. Like, let's just have people talking about you, because I think where that mentality comes from is, really honestly, since the 1930s, you just don't talk about them. And if they have a nice season, great. But just be in the conversation weekly. And they were a year ago, whether they were winning and losing, and it was because of that quarterback and because of that Alabama game. And so, yeah, if they have a chance to win, they won 6 a year ago, 7 a year ago, if they have a chance to win 2 more than that, take that right now and go straight to December.
When you look at Diego Pavia's mindset coming into this year, it's so over the top, it almost feels fraudulent. I'm not trying to be like negative. It just feels like a lot. Last year it was like kind of fun. Now it's like, all right, it's taking it maybe a step too far. In your interaction with him, what kind of vibe did you get from him about his approach to this upcoming season?
Well, he believes it, and he's always been like this. Like that's the thing that I took away is that sometimes guys start feeling it, and sometimes he's the biggest story in college football, and we're effing getting turned and all that stuff after the Alabama game. He's just like that all the time. And when I talked to his family, he was like that when he was 6. And one of the main reasons that the reason he was not recruited by New Mexico, even though he grew up in Albuquerque and, had an undefeated season as a senior and nearly won a state championship, they wouldn't even give him a look because they said he was too cocky. So this is just how this dude has always been. And so it doesn't surprise anyone that knows him. But what's interesting is that people are getting a little tired of it. A year ago it was great. And then, he talking about SEC Media Days. He was very vocal at SEC Media Days, and he's been on the podcast tour hard, especially all the Nashville podcasts recently. And then, he was kind of popping off on the Netflix show. And so what's interesting is I think if I had written this story, a year ago, and a lot of writers wrote about him right after the Alabama game, the reaction was, this guy's awesome. When I wrote about him, 2 days ago, a lot of the reaction was, okay, I'm sick of this guy. And so I think he's peaked in a lot of people's minds, and I think some people are going to be rooting against him, or, hey, Vanderbilt, shut up and go get back in the corner. But I also believe in Clark Lee. Like I think it's interesting talking to him about how he's changed his mentality. Because you guys remember his first SEC Media Days, he sat there and said, we can compete for a national championship. And literally people started laughing in the room. And that year they won their first 2 and then didn't win again the rest of the year. And so he has also kind of figured out, all right, this is what this job is, and this is what we have to do. And, the reality too is they're actually, for the first time since the 80s. They're improving their facilities. I mean, they're slowly getting there, and Pavia has just kind of gotten them in that conversation a little quicker than they wanted to expect it to be.
Here's where I went with it, Ryan, and not that you really care what I think at all, but last week we were talking about this, and I'm not sick of him. I'm not really annoyed by it, but I do feel like it's becoming a bit of an act. And when it becomes an act and people react to it the way that you said some others are, it then becomes a distraction to your football team because people don't view it as real. And then people are talking about it in different ways, and that becomes a conversation piece around the facility. And I told Greg, I said, when you start to become a distraction, that's when we have a problem. You can think you're as good as you want. You can talk about your goals. The one thing you can't do is tell me that the standard is a national championship when that's never happened. That's actually not the standard. To create the standard, you have to go do it, and then it can become the standard. So the distraction portion was what I'm concerned about. And let's be honest, when has Vanderbilt ever had to worry about that? I mean, the one D lineman that said, watch out Alabama or whatever, the year they lost by 55 the next week. I mean, that's the only one I can even recall.
Yeah, I go back to old school when I think it was my junior or senior year when I was a student at Tennessee, and Jerry DiNardo took over the job at Vanderbilt, and they had won like 5 games. And if they beat Tennessee, they're going to go to a bowl game for the first time since whenever. And that's when DiNardo refused to say Tennessee. He just say the school in Knoxville or whatever. They took out billboards. The rivalry begins now. And I think the final score was 55-0. And so, and Vanderbilt did not win the game. And so there's only a couple times in the history of the program. But listen, if they win games, you guys know no one's going to care. Like no one's going, oh, well, you know what? He's pretty good. But if they start the year off 0-5, now all of a sudden, everybody's pointing fingers. But
it actually becomes more of a distraction then, if that's the case, because people go back to what you said prior. You're not even saying it now, and then you start having to talk about things you said a month ago, and that's even worse.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch because, he played for Jerry Kill and Tim Beck at New Mexico State, which is why he's there. He's got like a half a dozen teammates from New Mexico State, in the locker room with him. There's people that know who he is, and they know how to live with it, and they know how to compartmentalize it and all that. But there's also, 80 other guys in the locker room. So it will be very interesting to watch, but it won't be boring. That's the thing. Vanderbilt's always boring.
Farthest thing from boring.
They ain't boring right now. And so I think if you're Vanderbilt, you'll take not being boring over which you've been for the most part of the last century.
Well, the coolest thing Clark Lee told us at Media Days, and maybe I have a little bit more of a behind-the-scenes take on this, having talked to Clark a couple of times last year, having his games, and how he sort of readjusted to how he handles and manages his team, was he's like, listen, I need Diego to be Diego.
Yep.
But I want to help him be better and not become a distraction and maybe not say things all the time that he doesn't have to. But I still need that guy with the chip on his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
I still need that guy that essentially hates everybody he's competing against, because that's when he goes out and plays his best. I got to have that guy. So it's an interesting conundrum of we want the talker, we want the chip on his shoulder, but it just doesn't always have to be in front of a microphone.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I don't think it's a long psychological walk to, when the three of us have the opportunity to talk to some of the most accomplished people in the world. From Nick Saban to Rick Hendrick to, give me all these super successful people that I deal with. And they all talk about, they have a recurring dream of they're at work and everything is going great. And then all of a sudden, all the people from their hometown show up and go, the jig is up. You're an imposter, and they take everything away. And I think there's that in the back of Diego Pavia's mind, because if you know how he grew up and you know where he came from, and he's proud of that, but he also is constantly trying to make sure he never has to go back to that. And so I think sometimes, a lot of times, guys like that will talk because there's always that little fear in the back of your mind that, man, I don't want to go back to where I came from. And, Nick Saban's talked about that, about, where he grew up in West Virginia, where he loves, but he don't want to go back there. And, my dad talks about that, about one day they all come in and take all your money away and take all the success you've had away, and you got to go back to that little tiny town you grew up in, North Carolina. It's just, I think there's that in the back of his mind, and that's where a lot of that, whether he's willing to admit it or not, he's nervous. because the next 6 months, the next 5 months are going to determine whether or not all his dreams come true. And in the meantime, now he can also make some money. So it's a really, really fascinating study in this NIL era. And he's uniquely Diego. There's no question about that.
That's my biggest fear, though, is he has made himself into a real enemy, and I think guys are going to go after him this year. I'm not saying try to hurt him or anything. Like I don't think no one has that cruel of a heart. Like okay, like I don't believe in like the bounty.
Say no one, but
I would think this generation
it's different.
Not really. Back in the day, 100% I'm going after his knees. Like, no way in this generation. I just don't see it that way. Guys have too much mutual respect for each other to take cheap shots. But I think they're going to try to make an example of him with how he's handled this offseason. And I just wonder if Diego, part of the reason why he's talking right now, because he knows he needs to strike while the iron's hot before reality sets in here in a week or two.
Well, he'll be in Tuscaloosa October 4th, and they're still a little mad at him down there, and so be careful. And they could be 4-1 going into that game. So it's going to be that game might be everything he always dreamed of, and then it might not be the dream that he expected to have when he gets down there. But we'll see. That's why they play the games, boys.
It's true.
Ryan, there's some interesting stuff. I know Pete Thamel had a write-up on Austin Simmons recently. You guys have a little bit more of a backseat view, discussion points with coaches, players at SEC Media Days. What were your thoughts on he and Ole Miss entering Atlanta? And since then, how has that opinion changed of maybe what he will be or that football team will be this season?
I think I've spent a lot of time in Oxford this year because we're working on a project that'll drop, in the middle of September. What we've been doing with Ole Miss, I have, and it's an interesting time because, I think the rest of us have big questions. But if you're in the building down there, I feel like every 2 years this is the conversation, and every 2 years, by the end of that year, we're talking about Lane and this quarterback. Gosh, they just can't. They just read each other's minds. And so there doesn't seem to be a lot of concern. I think that kind of talking about Vanderbilt, what you want to do is you want to build the foundation. All right, this is the minimum of what we're going to do every year. So can we use this as a launching pad to get to the next level? And they feel like they've built it down there. And I don't know if there was Ole Miss is a fascinating place to me because there's all this history and all this tradition, and we talk about all these things, and the Grove is the Grove and all that. And then you guys know, you go stand in the stadium, and you look up on the Ring of Honor or whatever, and they got a co-divisional championship under David Cutcliffe, and that's kind of it from the last 30 years. I mean, that really is since Archie was there. And so I feel like they finally feel like they have this foundation built that they can use as a launching pad while they've had the greatest 5-year stretch in the history of the program. And so I don't think they're worried. I really don't. And I believe it from them as opposed to them trying to sell it to me, because they're not trying to sell it to you down there. They're just assuming that you know what they know, which is they're fine.
So I'm going to ask you this question that we're going to have a discussion on for a lot of the show today. How many teams possibly could end up in Atlanta this year? And I know the smart Alex listening to the show are going to say 2. We get that. I know that. And if they can't understand where I'm going with this, that's their fault. But how many teams would you rule out and say there is absolutely no chance that they can end up in the SEC championship game? Because I'm not 100% sure I'd completely rule out the one that we've been talking about.
I feel like that's, and I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I was literally having this conversation on an ESPN.com editorial call yesterday, which is, I don't know, I can't remember a year where I looked at everyone and I have a gigantic question mark. Like everyone. I mean, the Ole Miss Texas game, the Ohio State Texas game is massive and giant and all that, but Arch Manning's thrown less than 100 collegiate passes. I mean, I believe he could be really, really good, but I don't know that. And at Ohio State, half their roster's gone, and we're just, so my point is that I don't know that we should take for granted that any of these teams are just automatically have a chance to go to Atlanta. I really don't believe that because I look at the list and I'm like, all right, Alabama I think could be better, but they could lose 4 late games again. I think Tennessee is in for a tough year, which I'm going to lose my diploma by saying that, but it's a fact. I need someone to sell me. I mean, LSU, I'm going to see LSU that Saturday night, and they could lose their 6th straight week 1 game. I look at everyone, and I think the question is, who do we think are those automatic? Yeah, well, they're automatic contenders for Atlanta. I don't know that I have the answer to that because I'm not 100% sold on anyone right now. Texas is really, really deep, and LSU has got a lot of talent, but Georgia, when they're not getting speeding tickets, they're really good and deep. But have they lost their way? I don't know that there's any automatic qualifiers. I really don't.
Are you ruling Vanderbilt out of that?
Yes.
Are you ruling Mississippi State out?
Yes.
You ruling Arkansas
out? Yes.
Okay. I don't think there'll be another one. Maybe Ole Miss. Some people.
I think Ole Miss has got a chance. I think Ole Miss has a chance to at least. Like
I think after those, it's going to be tough for any of us to say, yeah, they're completely out of it. I'm not.
I don't know that Kentucky. I don't think Kentucky's an Atlanta team.
That's a fair one. Yeah, that's Greg and I have said Kentucky. We have no idea. Like, well, we don't know what to expect. We don't know how it's going to go. We can't put our finger on what that's going to be like. So.
To me, the encapsulation of the whole thing is Florida, because I think Florida, they could win 6 games or they could win 11. Honestly, and I feel that way about. I don't think that Texas isn't any. They're only win only 6 games, but I just think I have gigantic question marks, like serious, at least one giant serious question mark about every team in the conference. But yeah, but the bottom half, man, I don't think Oklahoma can get to Atlanta.
I would disagree with you there.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Brent enough that I wish that they would be there, but I don't think they get Atlanta. Okay. But I would give South Carolina a vote.
For sure.
I think they could.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, but I think that's why we have the chance for a run from the middle, from a South Carolina, from somebody like that. But because I don't know if the top, though they are talented, I still have these big ironclad question marks. And to me, that starts with Arch Manning.
Ryan, always appreciate it, man. Great stuff. Thanks for the time. Look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, go pack a bag, boys. It's time to go.
Almost. We're there. Appreciate it. Ryan McGee joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. Some great write-ups on SEC football players at ESPN.com. You can go catch those there. Don't forget about our friends at Train. Don't let the heat and humidity affect your home and family. Keep them comfortable with an affordable Train cooling system. They've been recognized as America's most trusted brand 11 consecutive years. They're the official cooling partner here at Jocks. Find a comfort specialist near you at Train.com. It's hard to stop a train. We finished that conversation on who can make it to Atlanta. Who do we rule out from making it to Atlanta? 800-239-9569. Tweet in at Mac and Cube. More next on Jocks.
Go inside Jocks 94.5 on Jocks TV. Morning Jocks, Mac and Cube, 3-man front video simulcasts are presented by Bill Smith Buick GMC and Game Day Men's Health. Watch on the Jocks mobile app and YouTube by searching Jocks 94.5 TV.